So I'm gonna be interviewing Mr. Wong. He is the head of the help desk at Burlington High. I'm gonna be asking him questions for my senior project, which is about how video games provide an escape from reality. So question one is, why do you play video games? Is it to reduce stress, anxiety, or for fun, or to socialize with friends/family?
I'd say probably mainly for fun, personally. And I don't know for sure, but I would think that probably for most people, if it wasn't fun, they wouldn't be playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say fun for me would probably be high up there. I think also, probably for most people. I think reducing stress and anxiety. I think there's also an element of that there as well. Um, so it's just it's another way to unwind. I mean, I think some
Yeah.
people may like watching TV or movies. For other people, I think it could be video games. I think sometimes people need or want a way to just sort of escape from reality, and I think something like games or could be movies or just I don't know whatever sports. I mean, I think we all like to have diversions to kind of just forget about whatever's happening if there are stressful things happening in our lives, whether it's through like school or work or whatever, and just kind of like spend some time kind of escaping that. So I would say definitely like the stress and anxiety part I can see as well. Um, and I think sometimes like games get a little bit of a um, I'll say maybe a bad reputation as being kind of antisocial, but I don't think that's necessarily the case, and that um, a lot of the games are very popular. They're multiplayer games. Granted, sometimes you're playing people that could be complete strangers, but then sometimes you may be playing, on a team with your friends, or you may be playing against your friends, but you're kind of like maybe chatting with them at the same time. Either like text chatting or actually voice chatting, whatever. So. I can see how they can be very social. So that could be with other friends or family members. So I'd say it could be, any or all of those things.
Mm-hmm. So question two is, when do you
I'm
usually
not
play
sure
video
I
games?
understand.
And
Sorry, for
that's
some
okay.
reason my Siri went off. Um, so I would say, so there's one particular game that I like to play a lot. So it's NBA 2K. So I'm a big basketball fan. I think I've been an NBA 2K player for gosh, it's been a while. So like I'd say 7 or 8 years. And so, kind of the thing that's interesting with video games, like I've played them since I was a kid. There were some periods where I played them less. I think maybe when the PS4 came out, I started playing more. So, I've actually had, other consoles, like I had the PS3. Don't think I ever had a PS2. So generally I'm like a PlayStation fan. But I'd say um, uh, after work, but I wouldn't say it's like immediately after. So I have kids; they're not super young, but usually it's kind of after they've gone to bed or they're kind of like in the process of going to bed. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's when I'll play, some rounds of NBA 2K or whatever. So it's like as I said, that's kind of the game that I have liked a lot. I have like liked Madden and used to play Madden a lot. This year, I don't know what it is. Like, I guess I haven't liked the version of Madden that came out this year, so I haven't really played it so much. Then I'd say, on the weekends, some. And, my kids play a little bit. So my older daughter has been playing Animal Crossing. Um, so she kind of played it a little bit during the pandemic, which, it was kind of like the game of the pandemic,
Yeah.
I guess. And so she played it some, then she kind of set it down. And then actually, funny enough, just the other day, she's like, okay, I want to play it and I want to start it over. And so she has friends that play it. So I guess she started kind of getting back into it yesterday, interestingly enough. And they're both fans of Among Us, so they'll play that. I'm now talking about my kids, so a little bit of a tangent, but I guess it does sort of relate. And then my younger daughter, I guess, does like Minecraft, and I guess she did play Roblox some. So I don't play those games with them, but sometimes I'll watch them play, and they've wanted to teach me Among Us, and I haven't really played it a lot. I think I played once or twice. So I'd say, yeah, it's a good sort of way to unwind, but I obviously try to do it when I've gotten other things done with work or whatever. So I'd say, probably later at night. Try not to make it too late, but sometimes, it can be hard because, frankly, sometimes games can be kind of addictive.
Mhm. So I know you mentioned NBA and Madden, but what other games do you like playing?
Um, Gosh, that's hard to say. Like every now and then, like, if there's a game like a big game um that has kind of come out that either like students have talked about or I've read about, I'll maybe get it. So like, there's a game Death Stranding that came out not long ago. Actually, I guess within the past year or so. So I got it. I played it some, and I would love to kind of get into story games more, but it's really sort of hard to because you can kind of get really sucked into them. And like I think maybe you and I had talked about some games like Red Dead Redemption,
Mhm.
which I'd love to get into. So sometimes I'll buy games and then it's almost like this thing that kind of sits on my shelf, and then I'm like, okay, I'd like to play it, but I'm worried I'm going to get like too sucked into it, right?
Yeah.
So quite often I'll just like have it sit there, and I'm like, okay, someday I'll play this. Maybe it'll be like during like a vacation or like summer vacation or something, and then I'll play it. But like I'm always a little bit worried about something that I feel like I'm going to get too immersed into. So I guess I tend to shy away from those a little bit because I don't want to be like sitting there like hours on end playing something, thinking like, okay, I need to see the next level or the next cutscene or just see what happens in it. So I would say I would like to play those games more, but I guess I deliberately don't because I just don't want to get super sucked into certain games that have like a really engrossing story or something.
Yeah. So number 4 is, do you think video games help you forget about your daily stress when you're playing them?
Well, I mean, I guess thankfully I don't really feel like I have a very stressful job. So I'm thankful for that. I mean, I guess there have been some stressful things about the pandemic and kind of the way the year has gone. I will say I have had jobs in the past that were stressful, and like it actually was something where yeah, I'd get home and I'd be like, okay, I just want to kind of like maybe relax and like play a game or NBA 2K, which I think it was sort of helpful. I'm not sure if it was always such a good thing, but it was like I just needed something to kind of take my mind off of like things that had been happening that like were very stressful during the day, or it was kind of like, okay, thank goodness I've made it to like Friday or the weekend, and then I would just like kind of play a game
Mhm.
because I was like, all right, I just need to kind of put the week aside. So I'd say, yeah, there were definitely times that it was, I guess I'll say it was helpful for me, but it was just like, okay, I've got this nervous energy. Um, like a lot of stressful stuff happens. So, I mean, I guess probably the better thing for me would have been like exercising, which, I still try to do. But sometimes it was just like you just be stressed, but then just like kind of tired, and you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna like play a game and just kind of escape from sort of reality, as I said.
Mhm. Do you believe that video games provide an escape from reality?
Yeah, as I said, I'd say definitely yes, and I think that is probably part of the appeal. Really, I mean, I think as with certain games, as like graphics have gotten better and like everything that you see on screen is more immersive. I think is like storylines and acting. Like in a lot of games, they hire like real actors. Like Death Stranding, I mentioned, um, uh, it has like real actors, and I haven't played like that latest Cyberpunk game, although it's gotten kind of like some
Yeah, I've played
some
some of
some
it.
bad
It's
reviews,
pretty
mainly
good.
because it's a very graphically intense game, and you practically need new hardware
Mhm.
to play it. But like like Keanu Reeves is in it. I think like Elon Musk has a cameo in it. So games are like a big business, and I think they are practically like movies now, or at least some games are, and like a lot of the reason that people go to movies is the entertainment aspect, but I think it's also that aspect of like just kind of escaping from reality for like an hour and a half to 2 hours or whatever. Which, unfortunately, we can't get that. Well, we could get it in a theater experience, but our theaters now are kind of like our homes, I guess. I grew up with arcades, and you can't. Well, you could go to an arcade, just wouldn't be as safe to right now. So I guess the fact that all those things now that I guess when I was your age or younger, you had to kind of experience it more externally. Now you can actually experience it in your home, and you can kind of, have that escaping from reality feeling in your home.
Hmm. Do you think people with anxiety attacks and major stress um, should they play video games to help fix that?
Um, it's kind of an interesting question. I think it really depends on what they play, right? So I guess if
Like
clearly to me, if
Minecraft or
like
something like that.
someone had some sort of you know I'll just say PTSD or something like that. I'm not sure like if playing like a war game, let's say if it was PTSD from combat, like that's probably not something that's going to be good for them. I mean, I think that maybe that's kind of an obvious answer for something
Hmm.
like that. But then there could be games that are more calming, and I actually had kind of looked at some of these games. So I like Stardew Valley, which again another game that I own but I haven't played, but like I had kind of read some things about it, and I guess some people actually like have had played that, um, and essentially it was like a soothing game for them. So I would say maybe some games actually could be maybe even almost therapeutic, and it sounds a little bit crazy, but like I've mentioned to you, and I guess like the past 2 or 3 years, I've gone to PAX East, which is like a big gaming convention. So, there are people that seriously talk about these things, gaming as, uh, being seen as something that could be positive. And I think like a lot of the time, um, maybe parents, frankly, like maybe my generation, some people in my generation, older generations look at it and they're like, okay, this is not a good thing. They'll see it as like, violent or a waste of time. And you're just kind of like sitting there sedentary or whatever, and not interacting with the world. But, you're sort of interacting maybe with a different world that you just don't see. And like I said, sometimes it can be like a social thing. And, if you're really interested in kind of looking at that, I can see if I can find those notes from the PAX East sessions I went to, where as I said, um, there were real medical professionals, and I don't know if there have been like studies per se, but I think most of it was maybe kind of like anecdotal, where they thought that games could be almost like a therapy for some people, which is kind of an interesting way to think about it, but um, it does make sense to me, I guess. But I guess it depends on the game and the person.
Yeah. So switching gears over to how nostalgia has affected video games. Do you think nostalgia has infected your video game experience?
I would say yeah. So as I mentioned, I grew up um, kind of in the age of Atari. So I had like an Atari 2600 console, and had like an Atari computer at one time, and had Apple II computers. So I think like a lot of the things that I played and I liked. The funny thing is, like, people still like to play those games. So, I mean, as you've seen, whenever Nintendo, or I guess like sometimes Atari, um, I think Sega, like all of the companies of the past, some still big in the present, like Nintendo, whenever they release like a retro console, they sell quite well, right? So I think they're probably selling quite well to people like myself that think like, oh, maybe my kids will like this, and like with my own daughters, they're kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever. But as I guess you've been more or less a member of like the esports or gaming club.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes I brought those gaming consoles in, and it's just cool to see kids experience them. So like I brought in an Atari 2600, and I had like my original paddle controllers for Pong. They didn't work so great, but they did kind of work, and so like people are getting a kick out of that. So it's kind of a neat thing, when you can kind of like bring sort of like your childhood history and you can show that to other people. And what's even cooler is like, they'll see it and they'll think like, oh, this is actually kind of fun, and they'll try it. With my daughters, I think um, they automatically tend to think that anything I think is cool is not cool. But I think if they actually tried it, they might think like, oh, there was something to that gaming of the past. So I think, definitely nostalgia um, amongst people of my age that really grew up, I think, with the first very popular games. I think it still kind of carries through, and I think there are certain games that are made now that are sort of emulating or copying some of that feel. I'd say something like Minecraft. Like you look at it, you're like, okay, graphically, this is not such a great game, but I think the things that they did with it um, uh, are still pretty good. Like as long as like the gameplay is good, even if the graphics aren't great. Gameplay and the way that the game kind of like captures you, I think, can be very important, even if sometimes like graphically it's not cutting edge or state of the art.
Hmm. Do you think nostalgia has influenced your current game purchases, like remakes or remasters?
Yeah, I would say sometimes that does happen. So so sometimes like there are these kind of compilations that come out, like like on the Switch. I think they've had like compilations of like old arcade games, old Sega games or something like that. And it's kind of fun because like, wow, instead of buying a dozen cartridges, I've got like one cartridge and it's got dozens of games that I knew or that I played. And again, like I said, I do have one of the old Atari kind of recreated consoles that has like tons of games. I have, I think, a couple of the Nintendo ones. The funny thing is, I was not a big. I guess I sort of missed out on the NES and SNES craze. Um, yeah, so I guess I don't know. Maybe it was busier back then. I mean, not that I'm not busy now, but I guess like there was a period where I guess I just didn't play games that much. So I think I sort of missed that point. So I think maybe that was like around probably post college and a little bit after that. Um, and then I think part of it was like, oh, I kind of missed that, so I that era. So let me get these retro consoles and try out these games that are kind of considered the classics. But yeah, I mean, nostalgia. I think just like anything, like it's why they remake movies, right? Or why
Mm-hmm.
they're still making Star Wars movies and TV shows, because I think nostalgia is like a big part of what makes people kind of come back to something. So I think with games, it's the same way. So sometimes it's like being able to buy like a bunch of games like on one cartridge or one disc that you can kind of like relive and replay again. Sometimes it's like a new twist on that game and you're just seeing like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like all the different Nintendo characters that have been around for, I guess in some cases, decades. It's kind of neat when they take those characters and they're just kind of putting them into like newer games, newer settings. So I think nostalgia definitely plays a big part in getting people to buy games.
Do you think that companies are using nostalgia for quick revenue?
Um, well, I think clearly, yeah. So, I mean, in some cases, like when they repackage something, like some of these retro consoles that they sell, like um, they didn't really have to do anything necessarily. They're basically, I guess, just copying the old games and putting it in like a new box or like a smaller box or something like that. And they sell very well, right? So I mean, I guess why wouldn't you do that if it's like a way to make easy profit?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess one thing that is uh, yeah, I don't know what the word I'm searching for is. Like I was gonna say sad. It's not a sad thing, but I guess like one thing that I do wonder sometimes as far as like, innovation in games is like it seems like people are either putting a twist on kind of retro games, which I suppose is fine, or they're trying to kind of like take very immersive shooters and making them even more immersive, making the graphics even better, which also is fine as well. But like I think the cool thing about the early age of video games is you had certain games that were just so innovative because I think as far as like the coding that went into it, you really had to have a very good idea, and then you had like limited amount of space on the cartridge to write the game. So I think that almost forced you to be creative. So I think uh, you know games will still sell. Obviously, games are doing ridiculously well now. Part of it is the pandemic, but I think post pandemic, it would be neat to see fresh ideas from people, and I don't know what those might be. Um, but I think the cool thing about kind of the early era of video games is like the ideas were just so inventive. Something like I don't know Donkey Kong or Dig Dug, like they were kind of weird concepts, but they worked so well. Or even just something like Pac-Man. So even though they were graphically simple games, I think the gameplay and the concept was just so unique, and so I'd like to see more of that. And I'm not sure, like I think it would exist, but I think people just have to kind of think about it a little more. So like I actually teach a game design class this year, which has been good, but like we started learning Pong,
Mhm.
and then we've kind of learned like, okay, how do you make a 3D environment? And so it's like a lot of the same sort of ideas. And I wish the class could actually be like a year long class, or I could have like like a game design one, game design two, because I think there's some really cool ideas that either young people would have, or others that could, if they got their hands on tools like the Unity game engine, like maybe they could come up with something that is something that people haven't even thought of. So I'd say the nostalgia thing is great. It's always going to sell, but I guess it would be good um, if we could. I don't want to say get past the nostalgia, but like try to come up with newer ideas in games. So I think that's one thing that sometimes I feel could be better in terms of like the future of the industry.
Yeah. So that's all the questions I have.
Okay, great. Yeah, so those are great questions. Happy to answer any other follow-up questions. And if you're really interested in like those notes I'd found or that I took from PAX East, I can send those along if that might help you
Yeah,
with what
that
you're doing.
would definitely be helpful.
Cool. Okay, so I'll look those up and I'll share those with you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Good talking to you. All right.
See ya.
See ya.